The rain had been falling for 3 straight days, heavy and endless, like the sky itself had cracked open. The air smelled like wet earth and panic. I stood on my porch, my boots sinking into the muddy ground as I watched what used to be my backyard, now transformed into a raging brown river. Wooden fences floated like matchsticks, tree roots tore through the soil, and my mailbox was halfway submerged. But none of this compared to the sight before me. A 4-lane asphalt road, the private highway the HOA had proudly built just 2 months ago without my permission, was cracking apart right in front of my eyes. Huge pieces of blacktop were peeling up like paper, splitting, twisting, and folding into the current. The entire thing, from the painted lines to the metal guardrails, was being swallowed by the floodwaters that used to be my protected wetlands. I could hear the faint hum of engines in the distance, cars trying to escape the neighborhood. But the road was gone. Completely gone. And in that moment, I knew something terrible had been set in motion long before the first drop of rain ever fell. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Karen, the HOA president. "You'll pay for this, Mark. This is your property, your mess." But I didn't reply. Because just beyond the collapsing road, I saw something move, something large, dark and fast, sliding under the water where the highway used to be. And that's when the lights went out. Pause. How did it come to this? How did a quiet piece of land I'd cared for my whole life turn into the epicenter of a disaster? Let me take you back to how it all began. I bought the land 15 years ago, a quiet stretch of 12 acres, with an old farmhouse and a wide, breathing wetland that sang with frogs at night. It wasn't just land to me. It was a memory, a promise. My grandfather had spent his final years there planting willows and preserving the marsh because, as he'd always said, wetlands are the lungs of the earth, boy. They breathe for us when we can't. He left it to me after he passed, and I made it my home. I didn't need much, just my dog Bruno, a few ducks who thought they owned the pond, and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Then the HOA came. They called themselves the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association, though I was never part of their development. Their fancy houses sat on the other side of the ridge, where the land was dry and perfect for construction. My property, sitting at the base, naturally absorbed their runoff. I didn't mind, until they decided my wetlands were unused community space. It started with polite letters, then not so polite ones. We'd like to discuss future development plans to improve road access. Your land would benefit from community infrastructure. Please cooperate to avoid legal complications. Each letter came signed by Karen Reynolds, blonde, polished, and convinced the world rotated around HOA bylaws. She'd wave at me during her morning walks, clipboard in hand, but her eyes were sharp as hawk talons. One day she came to my porch, smiling that tight, fake smile. "Mark," she said, "we're planning a new access road that connects Meadowbrook directly to the main highway. It'll reduce congestion, increase property values, and benefit everyone. We just need to run it through the edge of your land, the unused swampy part." I laughed. "You mean my wetlands, the ones protected by county conservation?" Her smile didn't budge. "Protected," she repeated slowly, "but not exempt from improvement. The HOA board has connections, and I'm sure we can work something out." I told her no. Politely at first, then firmly. Then, when she wouldn't stop showing up, I stopped being polite. Weeks passed, and I thought that was the end of it. I went back to my peaceful life, mowing the grass, feeding the ducks, and fixing the old shed roof that always leaked in April. Bruno chased dragonflies while I worked, and for a while, everything was good again. Until the sound of bulldozers woke me one morning. The rumble was deep and constant, shaking the kitchen windows. Bruno barked wildly, running in circles. I stepped outside, barefoot, still in my flannel shirt, and what I saw made my stomach twist. 5 massive yellow machines were carving through the far end of my property, cutting through trees, flattening cattails, and laying gravel. Men in orange vests yelled orders over the roar of engines. A white SUV with a Meadowbrook HOA sticker was parked at the edge, and standing beside it, Karen Reynolds. I stormed across the muddy field, shouting, "You can't be here! This is private property!" Karen turned, unfazed, like she'd been expecting me. "We sent notices," she said coolly. "You didn't respond. So, the board approved an easement." "What easement?" I barked. "I never signed anything." She shrugged, her smile as bright and fake as ever. "We'll handle the paperwork later. It's for the community, Mark. You'll see. It's progress." I wanted to scream, to tear up the ground they were destroying. But I stood frozen, watching as they poured the first layer of gravel into what used to be my grandfather's favorite willow grove. That night I called the county office, then the environmental board, then the sheriff. Everywhere I turned, I got the same answers. "We'll investigate. We'll review the permits. Please be patient." But the HOA moved fast. Within weeks, they had paved a straight, black strip right through the wetland, connecting the subdivision to the main road. They even put up a sign that read, "Meadowbrook Private Access Road, HOA Property." I couldn't believe it. My wetland, the one my grandfather protected, the one that absorbed the rain and gave home to herons and turtles, was now a road. The neighbors loved it. They waved at me as they drove by. Some even thanked me. But I could see it in their eyes. They had no idea what they'd done. Because wetlands don't forget, and nature doesn't forgive. Then came the rain. It started soft, like a drizzle, then heavier, then relentless. By the third day, my gutters overflowed. The newly built road cut right through the drainage pattern, trapping water where it used to flow. The pond overflowed, and the marsh began to rise. By the fifth day, the road was underwater. By the sixth, the asphalt began to peel. By the seventh, the flood took everything. I watched as cars floated down what used to be driveways, as fences snapped like twigs, as the same people who once waved now screamed for help. The highway the HOA built through my wetlands had become a riverbed, and it was pulling their homes down with it. The wind howled like a warning I'd ignored too long. Bruno barked from inside the porch as lightning split the sky in two. Somewhere through the storm, I thought I heard Karen's voice, faint, desperate. But I couldn't see her. And then the power cut out. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the road collapsing into the earth, the highway sinking, folding in on itself like it had never belonged there. I knew then that this wasn't just a flood. It was history repeating itself. Nature was taking back what was stolen. Where are you watching from tonight? When the storm finally ended, the silence was almost louder than the thunder had been. I woke up to the sound of dripping water and creaking wood. The old farmhouse groaned like it had survived a war. My yard, or what was left of it, was a mirror of mud and broken things. The smell of wet asphalt and decay filled the air. Bruno pawed at the door, whining softly. When I opened it, the cold air hit like a slap. My boots sank halfway into the muck as I stepped outside. Everything was gone. The willow trees, the duck pond, even the garden fence. The road the HOA had built was nothing but a black scar torn apart by the flood. Pieces of guardrail twisted like giant metal vines. Down the hill, I could see a few neighbors standing in shock. One man was trying to push his car out of a ditch, but it wasn't a ditch anymore. It was a crater where the highway had collapsed. The car's tires spun helplessly, splattering mud. I walked closer. The earth beneath my feet was soft and unstable, like walking on a sponge. Water still flowed in slow streams through the cracks. My heart ached as I looked at what used to be the wetland, now a graveyard of debris. A heron stood on a broken branch, wings tucked, watching in silence. Karen's white SUV sat crooked in the distance, half buried in the mud. Her pristine HOA sign was shattered beside it, its golden letters, Meadowbrook Private Access Road, smeared with dirt. For the first time, I didn't feel angry, I just felt tired. But I knew this wasn't over. I made my way back to the farmhouse to grab my phone. No signal. The power was still out. The only light came from the weak morning sun sneaking through the gray clouds. I set up a small fire in the fireplace to keep warm and to dry my clothes. By noon, a rescue truck rolled through the area, tires crunching over the wet gravel that remained of the road. 2 county workers stepped out, one young man holding a clipboard, another older man with muddy boots and a weary look. "You Mark Davis?" the older one asked. I nodded. He looked around at the damage and whistled low. "Heard this road was new. Who built it?" "The HOA," I said flatly. "Without permission?" He raised his eyebrows. "They built through a wetland?" "Yeah, my wetland. My property." The younger man flipped through some documents. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" I went inside and came back with a folder, the deed, the environmental certification, and even my grandfather's handwritten map. The older man took one look and shook his head slowly. "This shouldn't have happened," he muttered. "This area is part of a watershed zone. Any development here needed federal clearance." He turned toward the ruined road. "They've basically redirected the entire water flow. When the storm hit, it had nowhere to go but through here." I clenched my fists, feeling the mud ooze between my fingers. "And now the whole neighborhood's paying for it." He nodded. "Nature doesn't care about property lines, son. You block her path, she'll make a new one." By afternoon, people from Meadowbrook started arriving on foot, carrying their belongings in trash bags. The HOA houses were flooded, basements filled to the ceiling. Families were cold, scared, and angry. One woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she said. "We didn't know they were building on your land. They told us you approved it." I shook my head. I told them no, over and over. She looked down, ashamed. "Karen said it was community land. She told us it was legal." Just then, I saw Karen herself, trudging through the mud in ruined heels, her once perfect hair plastered to her face. She stopped a few feet from me, panting. "You have to help," she stammered. "The culvert near the main road collapsed. The neighborhood's trapped." I stared at her, unable to decide whether to laugh or scream. "You mean the culvert your road blocked?" She didn't answer. Her eyes darted away. "People could die if we don't clear it," she muttered. The older county worker overheard her. "Ma'am, we already called in emergency crews, but it'll take time. You folks did a lot of damage here." Karen's face fell. For the first time, she looked small, like the storm had washed the arrogance right out of her. That night, I sat by the fire, Bruno at my feet, listening to the distant hum of generators. The air outside buzzed with insects returning to the soaked land. I watched the reflection of the flames in the window and thought about my grandfather's words. The land remembers. Maybe this was nature's way of reminding everyone that greed and shortcuts come with a price. The wetlands weren't just a swamp, they were protection, a living shield. And when the HOA paved over it for convenience, they didn't just destroy a habitat, they destroyed the balance. Still, part of me felt sorry for them, even Karen. They didn't understand. They never did. They thought progress meant paving everything green. They forgot that kindness wasn't just toward people, it was toward the earth too. As I stared into the fire, I made a quiet promise to myself. When the flood cleared and the mud dried, I'd rebuild the wetland, replant the willows, restore the pond. But something deep down told me the story wasn't done yet. Because somewhere beyond the broken road, in the dark woods, I could still hear the faint rumble of machinery, like someone was digging again. And that's when Bruno started growling. Bruno's growl started low, rumbling from deep in his chest. His ears stood stiff, eyes locked on the back window. The firelight flickered across his fur, and the faint hum outside became clearer, a mechanical whine, steady and deliberate. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't the wind. It was an engine. I froze, listening. The noise was coming from beyond the wrecked road, the same area where the highway had broken apart. My first thought was that it could be emergency crews still working through the night, but something about the rhythm felt wrong. Too smooth, too controlled. Bruno barked once, sharply, like he wanted me to see. I grabbed my flashlight and my rain jacket and stepped into the cold air. The wind had died down. but the ground still squished beneath every step. The smell of wet oil and rotting plants mixed with the faint tang of diesel. I followed the sound down the path toward the wetlands. Moonlight shimmered across the pools of water that now covered most of the area. The deeper I went, the louder the noise became, until I could finally see a faint glow through the trees, yellow lights moving in the fog. And then I saw it. A backhoe, a full-sized excavator, half submerged in mud, still running. Its lights were on, engine roaring, and someone was sitting inside the cab. I moved closer, waving my flashlight. "Hey, you can't be here," I shouted. The machine stopped. The lights flicked off. Silence. For a long, eerie moment, all I could hear was the soft drip of water from the trees. Then a door creaked open, and a figure stepped out, a man wearing a reflective vest, mud up to his knees. He looked around nervously, then spotted me. "Who are you?" I demanded. He hesitated, then replied, "Construction. HOA sent me. Said to clear the debris so they can rebuild the road." I felt my blood pressure rise. "Are you insane? The flood just destroyed this place. It's not safe, and that road was illegal in the first place." He frowned, confused. "Look, I'm just following orders. They said this was urgent. Said they owned the property." "Owned?" I stepped closer, the mud sucking at my boots. "This is my land. They built that road without permission, and now they're sending people here in the middle of the night." The man backed away, raising his hands. "Hey, don't get mad at me. I'm just doing my job. But..." He paused. "You might want to talk to whoever's in charge. They're up by the ridge." Before I could ask who they were, he climbed back into the cab, revved the engine, and drove the backhoe deeper into the flooded field. I stood there, shaking with anger and disbelief. Even after everything that happened, the destruction, the flood, the damage, they were still trying to rebuild. The HOA wasn't done yet. By sunrise, I went to the ridge he mentioned. The air was misty, cool, and quiet. The ground steamed as the morning sun hit the wet soil. From a distance, I spotted a cluster of trucks parked along the remains of the road. White pickups with Meadowbrook HOA logos on the doors. And standing among them, clipboard in hand as always, was Karen Reynolds. She was barking orders at two men wearing suits, their shoes ruined in the mud. Her once perfect confidence had cracks in it now, but the defiance was still there. When she saw me approach, her eyes narrowed. "Mark," she said stiffly, "you shouldn't be here. This is an active recovery zone." I laughed bitterly. "Recovery? You mean trespassing, again?" One of the suited men stepped forward. "Sir, we're conducting an emergency repair assessment on behalf of the association. You'll need to step back." "Step back," I said, pointing at the destroyed wetlands. "That's what got us here in the first place. You people built through a protected zone, ignored every warning, and now you're talking about repairs." Karen crossed her arms, visibly trembling, though she tried to hide it. "You don't understand, Mark. If we don't fix this road, the homeowners can't access their properties. The insurance companies won't cover the losses unless we show we're taking corrective action." "Corrective action," I echoed. "You're trying to cover your tracks, not correct them." The suited man cleared his throat. "Sir, your emotional state is understandable, but please keep your distance. This is a liability issue." I stepped closer. "You want liability. You'll get it. You built a highway over federal wetlands without permission. When this gets out, you'll lose everything." Karen's face hardened. "You think this flood was our fault? Maybe if you hadn't neglected this land." "Neglected?" I cut her off, my voice echoing across the field. "I preserved it. I took care of it. You destroyed it." The air between us crackled with tension. Even the workers nearby stopped moving, watching. Then, suddenly, the ground shifted beneath our feet, a deep, wet sucking sound followed by a sharp crack. Everyone froze, another crack, louder this time. "Back up!" someone yelled. A massive section of the ground near the collapsed road began to sink. The mud bubbled, the water swirling like a whirlpool. One of the trucks slid sideways, its tires spinning. Someone screamed as the edge gave way, and the vehicle dropped nose first into the water below. Chaos erupted. Workers shouted, running for safety. Karen stumbled backward, nearly falling, while the suited men panicked, waving their arms. I grabbed Karen's arm and pulled her away from the edge, just as the earth split open again. The sound was deafening, a deep roar, like thunder under the ground. When the shaking stopped, we stood there, covered in mud, staring at the destruction. The road, what little remained of it, had sunk even deeper, the water swallowing the rest. Karen looked at me, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" I took a deep breath. "The land's collapsing, the water's reclaiming it." She looked down at her ruined shoes, then at the broken road, and for the first time since I'd met her, she had no words. But I knew this wasn't just nature's doing. Someone was still trying to dig, still trying to fight what couldn't be controlled. And deep beneath the water, I could hear that faint, mechanical hum again. It hadn't stopped. That night the air felt heavy, too still, too thick, like the storm had left something behind. Bruno refused to leave my side. He paced the living room, ears twitching at every distant sound. Every now and then, that same low rumble returned, faint but constant, echoing from deep within the flooded field where the road had been swallowed. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight shimmer on the dark pools outside. The water hadn't gone down much. If anything, it had spread farther. Trees leaned at strange angles, their roots exposed like bones. It was quiet, except for that rhythmic hum, metal against mud, somewhere far out in the night. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and jacket. Bruno barked, tail stiff, clearly uneasy. "It's okay, boy," I said softly, though even I didn't believe it. "We just need to see who's out there." The path to the wetlands was unrecognizable now. The grass was gone, replaced by slick, sucking mud that swallowed my boots with every step. The smell was worse tonight. Oil, damp wood, something metallic and rotten. The closer I got, the louder the sound became, steady and deliberate, like someone was still operating machinery long after everyone had left. When I reached the old willow grove, I froze. Floodlights, 3 of them, mounted on portable stands, their beams slicing through the mist. And in the middle of the flooded pit, 2 excavators and a generator. They were digging again. I could see silhouettes moving, at least 4 or 5 people. I crouched behind a half-fallen tree, watching. One of the men was giving orders. His voice carried over the hum of engines. "We're behind schedule. If we don't reinforce this ground before the inspection, we're finished." Another replied, "The soil's too soft. It's not holding." "Then dig deeper," the first man snapped. "We'll fill it with gravel later." I narrowed my eyes. Reinforce the ground. Before inspection. So they were trying to cover up what happened, to rebuild secretly before the county came back. My flashlight flickered, and I quickly turned it off. The last thing I needed was to be seen. Bruno stayed low beside me, growling quietly. The men worked fast, scooping out chunks of mud and broken asphalt. Then, one of them hit something hard. The machine's bucket screeched, metal grinding against something buried. The operator leaned out of the cab. "Hey, I hit something." "Is it pipe?" someone asked. "No, looks like concrete." "Concrete? Out here?" They jumped down into the pit, shining flashlights. I leaned forward, trying to see. The beam caught something pale, not concrete, not pipe, but a flat slab. It had carvings on it. Symbols faint but visible. One of the workers whispered, "What the hell is that?" Before anyone could answer, a loud crack echoed through the air, the sound of shifting earth. The ground beneath the machines trembled. "Shut it down!" someone shouted. Too late. The left excavator tilted, its tracks sinking into the mud. The floodlights wobbled, casting wild shadows. One of the men screamed as the ground gave way entirely, swallowing the machine halfway. I grabbed Bruno's collar and pulled him back. The air filled with shouts, splashing, the sound of machinery groaning as it slipped deeper. Then, silence again. The floodlights flickered, then went out, All I could hear was the soft, eerie sound of bubbling water. By morning, I returned to the spot with the county inspector. His name was Harris, same older man from before, now wearing a soaked raincoat and an expression that screamed exhaustion. He scanned the field, taking photos with his tablet. "They were digging here again?" he asked. "Last night," I said. "I saw it myself. Big machines, a crew of men. They hit something buried under the old road before it collapsed." Harris frowned. "That explains the equipment marks we found. Who'd be stupid enough to come back after this mess?" "The HOA," I said simply. He rubbed his forehead. "That woman again." "Karen," I confirmed. "They're trying to fix the road before the inspectors realize it wasn't permitted." He sighed. "That's not fixing, that's tampering with evidence. They could face federal charges for this." I hesitated. "There's more. They hit something, not a pipe, not rebar. Some kind of stone slab. Looked old. Marked." "Marked?" "Yeah," I said. "Like carvings, patterns. I only saw it for a second before the ground caved in." He typed something on his tablet, eyes narrowing. "This whole area sits on old conservation land. Before that, it was part of a protected indigenous site. If they disturbed any burial ground—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "That would explain the instability." "Instability?" I echoed. "The soil here isn't normal," he said, kneeling to touch the mud. "You pave over this kind of land, and it reacts. The water pressure builds underneath. It pushes back. Like the land's trying to breathe." I stared at the flooded field, feeling that same chill run down my spine. The wetlands weren't just angry. They were alive in their own way. My grandfather used to say the marsh had memory. Maybe he wasn't wrong. That afternoon, Karen showed up again, face pale, voice trembling. She didn't even try to look in control this time. "Mark," she said quietly, "I didn't authorize that digging. The board. They hired a contractor without telling me." I didn't believe her. "You expect me to think you didn't know?" Her eyes darted toward the field. "Something's wrong with that place," she whispered. "The workers are missing. They never came back this morning." The silence that followed was heavier than the clouds above us. Harris looked up sharply. "Missing?" Karen nodded. "They didn't check in. Their equipment's still out there, but there's no sign of them." I looked toward the wetlands. The water was calm now, too calm, like a mirror, not a ripple, not even a bird in sight. Bruno whined softly beside me, and as I stared into the water, I thought I saw movement, something dark, sliding just beneath the surface, slow and deliberate. Whatever they had disturbed under that road, it wasn't done yet. By dawn, the search for the missing workers had already begun. The county had sent out a small rescue team, 3 men with waders, ropes, and a drone hovering above the flooded wetlands. I stood beside Harris and Karen at the edge of the field, staring into the murky water that had swallowed both machines and men. The air smelled like rust and stagnant mud. The drone buzzed overhead, its reflection trembling on the surface like a restless ghost. On the monitor, the live feed showed the same thing we saw. Nothing but swirling brown water, bits of debris, and tangled roots. "Try the eastern edge," Harris instructed. The drone turned, panning toward the area where I'd seen the slab the night before. Then, for just a split second, something glimmered under the water, smooth, flat, grayish-white. "Pause there," I said quickly. The operator froze the feed. We all leaned closer. The screen showed a shape, large, rectangular, half buried in mud, not concrete, not metal, something older. Karen frowned. "Is that stone?" Harris squinted. "Looks carved. Could be part of an old foundation, maybe even a monument." I whispered, "That's what they hit." Before anyone could say another word, the screen flickered, static for half a second, and when the image cleared, the slab was gone. The operator blinked. "Wait, what?" "It just disappeared." "Rewind," Harris ordered. The man rewound the footage, frame by frame. 1 second it was there. The next, a cloud of silt rose from the bottom, swallowing it whole. The hairs on my neck stood up. "It moved," I said quietly. "Or something covered it." Karen shook her head. "That's impossible." But the look in her eyes betrayed fear. By afternoon, the rescue team gave up. No bodies, no signs of the workers, not even their helmets. Only the excavator's arm stuck out of the water, like a skeletal limb. Harris promised to call in a geological survey, but the county's resources were stretched thin after the flood. "We'll need to wait a few days," he said. "Just stay off the property until we can assess it." Stay off my own property. I wanted to argue, but one look at the field shut me up. The ground was still bubbling in places, releasing slow bursts of air from beneath the surface. Every few minutes, a low rumble echoed from deep underground, like distant thunder that never moved. Karen left in silence, her SUV tires splashing through puddles. Harris stayed behind long enough to take a few soil samples before he too drove off. That left me and Bruno. The sun dipped low, painting everything gold and gray. The wetlands glimmered like liquid glass, calm but deceptive. I stood there for a long time, wondering how something so still could hold so much destruction. When I finally turned back toward the house, Bruno stopped walking. He stared at the water, ears flat, growling softly. "What is it, boy?" He barked once, then again, louder this time. The water rippled. A single bubble broke the surface, followed by another. Then, movement. A helmet. It floated up slowly, spinning. My breath caught in my throat. Mud clung to its surface, but I could make out faint scratches along the side, like claw marks. I waded closer, boots sinking deep. The water was cold enough to bite. I reached out with a stick and nudged the helmet toward me. It flipped over and I froze. Inside the helmet was mud. Nothing else. No blood. No hair. Just mud. And carved along the inside rim, crudely scratched into the plastic, were 3 letters. SOS. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. Bruno barked wildly now, pulling at his leash, trying to drag me away. Then the water stirred again, faster this time. The helmet sank, disappearing into the same spot it had risen from. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, the mud clutching at my legs like hands. That night the storm returned, not as strong as before, but enough to rattle the windows. I sat by the fire trying to calm my thoughts. Bruno lay beside me, restless, his eyes fixed on the door. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mark." The voice was low, shaky. "Karen, what do you want?" "They're saying the workers. They found something before they disappeared." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" "One of the wives called me," she said. "Her husband sent her a voicemail right before it happened. She said he sounded terrified." "Did she tell you what he said?" There was a pause, then barely a whisper. "He said, 'We uncovered something alive.'" I went cold. "Alive? In the ground?" "I don't know," Karen whispered. "I think—" Static cut her off, then silence. "Karen," I said, but the line was dead. Outside, thunder rolled again. Bruno growled, backing away from the window. I turned and saw something glinting outside the glass. A light. Small, flickering. Someone was standing near the wetlands, holding a flashlight. I could see the faint outline. A tall man, shoulders hunched, face hidden by the beam. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching the house. I grabbed my own flashlight and pointed it toward him. But he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just the empty field and the soft sound of rain. Bruno whimpered, pressing close to me. I locked the door and drew the curtains tight. Whatever was out there, whatever they'd unearthed, it wasn't finished with us yet. And I had a feeling it wouldn't be long before the wetlands took another. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the helmet again, the mud filling it like flesh, the letters SOS scratched inside. Bruno stayed close to me, occasionally lifting his head to growl at nothing. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sound of dripping water was constant, echoing through the house like a ticking clock. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, that faint mechanical hum. Only this time it wasn't distant. It was close. Too close. It vibrated through the floorboards like something deep beneath the earth had come alive. I sat up, listening hard. Bruno whined softly, his eyes fixed on the back door. Then came another sound, not metal this time, but voices, whispering. Faint, muffled, overlapping like several people speaking underwater. I held my breath, straining to hear. It wasn't English. The words were rhythmic, like a chant carried on the wind. Bruno barked once, sharp and loud, breaking the silence. The whispering stopped. The hum faded. I stayed still for a long time after that, flashlight in one hand, an old baseball bat in the other. But nothing else happened. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I was still sitting in the same spot, eyes red, heart pounding. The morning sky was pale and colorless. Mist clung to the trees as I stepped outside. Everything felt heavier, the air, the ground, even the silence. The wetlands looked calm again, but I knew better. That's when I noticed the footprints. They started near the back steps, muddy, heavy prints leading from the wetlands to my porch. Human. Barefoot. I crouched down to look closer. The prints weren't fresh, but they hadn't been there last night. Each one was filled with dark water, reflecting the cloudy sky above. Bruno sniffed one and growled low, tail between his legs. "Come on, boy," I whispered. "We're not staying here." I decided to drive to town, get a signal, call the sheriff, tell him everything. Maybe he wouldn't believe the strange parts, but he'd have to act on the missing workers. I loaded Bruno into the truck and turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. I tried again. Same result. Battery was fine. Gas was fine. But the truck refused to start. Something didn't want me leaving. I slammed the steering wheel and stepped out, kicking the tire in frustration. That's when I saw movement near the ridge, a figure walking along the flooded path. Karen. She was soaked, her clothes muddy, her hair plastered to her face. She looked terrified. When she saw me, she waved frantically. "Mark! Thank God!" I jogged toward her, boots squelching in the mud. "What are you doing here?" "They called me," she panted. "The sheriff's office. They found something by the county line. Said it was one of the missing men." My stomach turned. "Alive?" She shook her head slowly. "No." I waited for her to continue, but she just stared at the wetlands, eyes wide, like something was moving out there. "They said his body washed up miles away, but his skin..." She stopped, shivering. "They said it was covered in markings. Like carvings." "What kind of carvings?" She looked at me, voice trembling. "Symbols, the same ones that were on that stone slab." A gust of wind rushed across the field, rippling the water. The air suddenly smelled of decay, thick and sour. "We have to leave," I said firmly. "Now. The road's out, but we can walk to the main highway." "No," she said, shaking her head violently. "You don't understand. I think it's following us." Before I could ask what she meant, a loud splash echoed behind us. We turned. The water near the center of the wetland was churning again, rising and falling like something massive was moving beneath. Waves rippled outward, hitting the edges of the broken asphalt. Karen took a step back. "It's coming up again," Bruno barked, fur standing on end. I grabbed her arm. "Run." We sprinted toward the house as the water erupted behind us, a violent surge that sent mud and debris flying. Something dark broke the surface. Not a creature exactly, but a shape, shifting and formless. It rose and fell like a shadow cast by the water itself. Karen screamed. We stumbled onto the porch, slamming the door behind us. The whole house shook as another wave hit. Windows rattled. The lights flickered even though the power had been out for days. I pulled her into the living room. "What was that?" She couldn't speak, just shook her head, gasping for breath. Then, from outside, came a single drawn-out creak. I froze. It was the sound of my porch swing moving, back and forth. Slowly. No wind. Just the rhythmic squeak of the chain and the faint drip of water hitting the wood. I peered through the window. Just enough to see. The swing was moving, and sitting right in the middle of it was a construction helmet. The same one I'd seen floating in the water, the one with SOS scratched inside. But now, something new had been carved beneath those letters. A single word, jagged and uneven. Run. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. Karen stared, her face pale as paper. "We need to get out of here," she whispered. I nodded. At first light. But deep down, I already knew something none of us wanted to say aloud, that whatever had awakened under that road wasn't bound by day or night anymore. And it was getting closer. Outside, the swing creaked once more, then stopped completely. The next morning arrived heavy and gray, the kind of morning where the sun seemed afraid to rise. Mist drifted low over the flooded fields, blurring the line between water and sky. Karen hadn't slept at all. She sat at my kitchen table, wrapped in one of my old jackets, staring blankly at her untouched coffee. Bruno lay by the back door, still growling every few minutes at sounds only he could hear. Neither of us had spoken much since the swing incident. The image of that helmet still haunted me. Sitting perfectly upright, the word "run" carved into it like a threat. I'd thrown it into the shed before dawn, locking the door tight, but even from inside the house I swore I could still hear it faintly tapping against the wood, like something inside was trying to get out. I finally broke the silence. "We're leaving." Karen looked up, her eyes bloodshot. "You said that last night." "I mean it this time. We can take the trail by the ridge. It's dry enough now to reach the county road." She shook her head. "You don't understand. It's not just the wetlands anymore. The sheriff's deputy who called me. He said the water's spreading. New sinkholes opened overnight, even outside the HOA boundaries. It's moving." "Moving," I frowned. "Water doesn't move like that." "Then explain why they found another worker's truck miles away in a field that wasn't even flooded yesterday." My stomach twisted. Something about her tone wasn't hysteria. It was truth wrapped in fear. I turned to the window. The water looked calm again. Too calm, smooth as glass. But as I watched, a small ripple crossed the surface, perfectly circular, as though something had dropped a single stone dead center. Then another, then another. The ripples didn't fade. They grew wider, spreading until the whole surface shimmered like it was breathing. Bruno stood up suddenly, barking at the window. Karen grabbed my arm. "Mark, what if it's trying to come through?" We packed what we could: flashlights, dry clothes, bottled water. Karen wanted to bring the HOA files she'd kept in her car, proof of every illegal construction, every forged permit, but I told her to leave them. Paper wouldn't help us now. As we stepped onto the porch, I felt it. A vibration underfoot, subtle but deep, like the hum of distant thunder buried in the ground. The air itself seemed to buzz. Halfway across the yard, I heard a splash. I turned. The water level near the house was rising again, inch by inch. It wasn't raining, yet the wetland was swelling. Karen froze. "Oh God, it's not stopping." We moved faster, trudging through the mud toward the ridge trail. The ground was soft and uneven, every step sinking deeper. The sky darkened again, not from clouds, but from mist thickening into fog. Somewhere behind us, a creaking noise broke the stillness, wood twisting, snapping. I looked back and saw my old shed tilting forward. The door burst open, and the helmet rolled out, splashing into the water. Then it started to move upstream, against the flow. Karen screamed. "Run!" I shouted. We scrambled up the ridge, slipping on the slick ground. The fog closed in, turning everything gray and shapeless. Bruno ran ahead, barking nonstop. The hum grew louder now, vibrating through the soil. And then, faint at first but clear, the whispers returned. This time they were closer, almost surrounding us. Low, guttural voices weaving through the mist. I couldn't make out the words, but they carried a rhythm, like a warning or a memory being spoken aloud. Karen clutched my sleeve. They're everywhere. Keep moving. The ridge leveled out, revealing the old wooden footbridge my grandfather had built decades ago. It crossed a narrow stretch of the wetland. Back then, it had been a quiet stream. Now, beneath the bridge, the water churned dark and thick. We were halfway across when the boards beneath us began to tremble. I heard it, and that deep crack from below. "Don't stop!" I yelled. Karen ran ahead, but the plank under her foot splintered with a sharp snap. She screamed as her leg plunged through, catching at the knee. I grabbed her arms and pulled hard, the wood groaning beneath us. "Hold on!" The water below surged upward, frothing violently. Something pale moved beneath the surface, not a body, not an animal, larger, like a shape trying to form. I yanked with everything I had. Karen came free just as the plank gave way completely. A column of water exploded upward, soaking us both. The bridge shook, and the whispers turned into a single deep moan that made my bones ache. We stumbled to the other side, collapsing onto solid ground. The bridge behind us folded in on itself, the remains sinking slowly into the rising water. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The forest was silent again, except for Bruno's panting and the distant drip of rain from the leaves. Karen looked at me, shaking. "It's not water," she whispered. "It's something else, something old." I thought about the carved slab, the way the ground had swallowed it, the bodies covered in markings. Maybe this wasn't just a flood. Maybe it was the land remembering everything taken from it. The highway, the wetlands, the broken promise of preservation. "We have to tell someone," I said finally. "The county, the state, someone." Karen wiped her face with muddy hands. "You really think they'll believe us?" Before I could answer, Bruno barked again, turning toward the path ahead. There, through the fog, a figure was standing, motionless, half hidden by the trees. Tall, barefoot, covered head to toe in mud, and wearing a yellow construction vest. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "That's one of them." The figure tilted its head slowly. Then it raised an arm, pointing back toward the wetlands. The ground trembled once more. Whatever had awakened down there wasn't finished yet. The figure didn't move at first. He just stood there, a silhouette in the fog, pointing back toward the wetlands, as if commanding us to look. Karen gripped my arm so tightly that her nails dug into my skin, but I couldn't move either. There was something wrong about the way he stood. Too still, too deliberate. The fog shifted slightly, revealing more of him, and that's when I saw his face, or what was left of it. His skin looked like it had been carved, lines, symbols, spirals that shimmered faintly in the gray light. His eyes were open, but dull, glazed over like wet glass. Mud dripped from his hair, running down his neck in slow streams. Yet he was breathing. I could see his chest rise and fall. Karen whispered, "That's one of the workers." I recognized the vest. Bruno growled low, pressing against my leg, but didn't bark this time. His instincts told him something mine already knew. This wasn't a man anymore. The figure tilted his head, his lips twitching. Then, in a hoarse voice that sounded like water rushing through gravel, he spoke. "You shouldn't have built." Karen gasped. "Oh my God." The man took one slow step forward. "It remembers," he rasped, his eyes flicking toward the wetlands behind us. "It remembers everything." "What remembers?" I shouted, though my voice came out shakier than I meant. He opened his mouth to speak again, but what came out wasn't words. It was a low, guttural moan that echoed from the trees, vibrating in the air around us. The fog thickened instantly, swirling like smoke. "Run," I whispered. We turned and bolted through the trail, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us, I heard heavy footsteps splashing through the mud, slow but steady, following. The path curved downhill, leading toward the back road that connected to the highway. We stumbled over roots and rocks, nearly losing our footing more than once. Bruno barked furiously, trying to herd us forward. Then, just as the trees began to thin, Karen tripped. She hit the ground hard, crying out. I spun around, grabbed her arm, and tried to pull her up, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring past me. "He's gone," she whispered. I turned. The fog behind us was empty. No footsteps, no sound, just mist curling between the trees. We didn't wait to find out where he'd gone. We kept moving until the forest opened up to the back road. The asphalt was cracked and half covered in mud, but it was the first real piece of solid ground I'd seen in days. I felt a small flicker of hope, but it didn't last long. Half a mile down the road, we saw flashing lights, sheriff's cruisers, an ambulance, a county truck. Relief surged through me. We waved our arms, running toward them. 2 deputies came forward, one of them shouting, "Stay back!" "It's okay," I yelled. "We live down by the wetlands. We need help." The deputy lowered his flashlight, his expression dark. "You're from Meadowbrook?" Karen nodded weakly. "Yes, I'm with the HOA board." He cut her off. "Ma'am, you'll need to stay put. We've got a situation down here." "What situation?" I asked. He exchanged a look with the other deputy before answering. "We found something in the drainage field. 3 of the missing workers." Karen's face went white. "Alive?" The deputy's voice dropped. "No, ma'am. And you don't want to see them." Harris, the county inspector, appeared from behind one of the trucks, his boots caked with mud. "Mark," he said when he saw me, "I told you to stay off that property." "You don't understand," I said quickly. "Something's happening there, something not natural. The workers disturbed something beneath the wetlands. It's—" He raised a hand. "I know." I froze. "You know," he sighed heavily. "We found part of the slab this morning, the one you told me about. The markings on it. They're older than anything in our records. Pre-colonial, maybe even older than that. And those same markings are carved into the men we found." Karen swayed on her feet. "That can't be real." "I wish it wasn't," Harris said quietly. "It's like the land itself branded them." He looked at me, eyes weary. "Whatever's under that wetland, it's not done. It's expanding outward. The soil composition's changing miles from the center. We've got geologists coming in tonight." I wanted to tell him about the man we'd seen, the worker who spoke, the one who wasn't quite human anymore. But something in Harris's face stopped me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, like he already knew how bad it was. Then a shout came from one of the deputies near the ditch. "Sheriff, you need to see this." We rushed over. The mud there was thick and black, bubbling slightly. The bodies had already been covered with tarps, but beside them, sticking out of the ground, was something else, a chunk of that same carved stone. Only this one wasn't flat. It curved upward like the edge of a dome. "Oh no," Harris muttered. "It's not a slab. It's the top of something larger." Karen backed away, her voice trembling. "You mean there's more buried under there?" Before anyone could answer, the ground shuddered beneath us. A deep, hollow sound rolled out from the wetlands, like a breath exhaled from the earth itself. The water in the ditch began to swirl. The mud bubbled harder, faster. Then, silence. Every bird in the forest stopped singing. And slowly, from the rippling surface of the water, a single human hand emerged, pale, slick with mud, its fingers twitching. Karen screamed. The deputies drew their guns, shouting for backup. Harris stumbled backward, tripping over the tarp. I grabbed Bruno's collar, yanking him close as the hand clawed its way free. It wasn't just a body coming up. It was a shape, human-sized but twisted, covered in the same markings that glowed faintly even in daylight. And it was still moving. The creature, if that's what it was, clawed its way from the mud, its body shaking as it tore free from the earth that had buried it. The smell hit first, sour rot and iron, thick enough to choke on. The markings that ran across its skin weren't just carved. They glowed faintly, pulsing like veins filled with light. Deputies shouted, guns raised, but none of them fired. It wasn't that they were frozen in fear. It was that the thing wasn't attacking. It was struggling, as if trying to remember how to stand. Karen clung to me, trembling. "Mark, that's the same markings from the slab." Harris nodded, eyes wide. "No doubt. But this can't be human." The creature tilted its head toward the wetlands, as if listening to something none of us could hear. Then slowly, it raised one hand and pointed west, toward Meadowbrook. And then it spoke. Its voice was deep, distorted, but unmistakably human. "It remembers," it said again, the same words the worker had spoken in the forest. "You built where it sleeps." A deputy took a cautious step forward. "Sir, whatever you are, stay where you are." The creature's eyes turned toward him, hollow, glowing faintly. "You paved its lungs. You crushed its breath." The words vibrated through the ground, echoing like thunder. Then it collapsed. One heavy fall, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The moment it hit the mud, the water around it began to boil. The glowing lines spread outward like cracks of light, racing through the wetlands and toward the subdivision. "Get back!" Harris yelled. We all stumbled away as the earth trembled violently. The ditch burst open, sending black water gushing toward the road. One of the county trucks was lifted and flipped like a toy. The deputies barely managed to jump clear. Karen screamed, clutching my hand. "It's heading for the houses!" I turned to Harris. "What's under there? What's it waking up?" He shook his head. "Something old, something that was never supposed to be disturbed." The ground buckled again, and the sound that followed wasn't thunder this time. It was breathing. Deep, wet, rhythmic breathing, like the land itself was alive. We ran. By the time we reached the top of the ridge, the entire wetland had transformed into a churning lake of black water. The old highway the HOA had built was completely submerged, only the tops of the guardrails still visible. Every few seconds, another section of the ground would collapse inward, creating a whirlpool that swallowed everything in sight. From up high, we could see Meadowbrook, the rows of pristine homes that had once gleamed with pride and HOA regulations, now standing like pale ghosts against the storm-dark horizon. The water was moving toward them fast, cutting through backyards, gardens, and driveways. Harris stood beside me, gasping for breath. "The aquifer's rupturing, the whole floodplain's collapsing. It's draining the underground channels." Karen turned to him, eyes wild. "Can we stop it?" He shook his head. "You don't stop something like this. You move before it takes everything." Down below, the first house gave way, its foundations sinking as if pulled by invisible hands. One after another they followed, roofs collapsing into the mud. The HOA sign, once gold and proud, toppled into the current, spinning before vanishing completely. Karen fell to her knees, sobbing. "It's all gone. Everything." I put a hand on her shoulder, but my eyes stayed on the horizon. The glow from beneath the water hadn't faded. If anything, it was spreading. Thin veins of light branching outward through the soil like roots. And then, for the briefest moment, I saw shapes moving beneath the surface. Dozens of them. Human forms drifting, rising, vanishing again. The workers, or what was left of them. Night came fast. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, but they were far too late. The county road was gone, the bridge collapsed, and the wetlands had stretched into a vast inland sea that reached the edge of town. We took shelter in the ranger's cabin at the top of the ridge, a small wooden outpost that overlooked the valley. Inside, Harris tried to contact the state office with his radio, but all we heard was static. Karen sat by the window, staring into the darkness. "It's my fault," she whispered. "If I hadn't pushed the road, if I hadn't ignored you." I wanted to tell her it wasn't just her fault, that greed and pride had built that highway, not one person. But the truth was, she had been the one who made it happen. And now, there was no undoing it. The cabin lights flickered once, then died. Bruno lifted his head and growled. In the distance, through the window, we could see the faint glow again, pulsing rhythmically beneath the water, like the heartbeat of the earth. And then a sound rose through the night. Not thunder, not machinery, but a chorus of whispers, hundreds of voices murmuring in perfect unison. They weren't angry, they weren't screaming, they were remembering. Harris stumbled to his feet, flashlight trembling in his hand. "It's not just the land," he said. "It's everything buried with it, every memory, every life taken by progress. It's all coming back." I looked out the window. The glow was moving uphill now toward us. Karen's voice broke. "Mark, what happens when it reaches here?" I didn't answer, because in that moment I realized what the markings meant. The same words the creature had spoken, the same ones carved into every drowned man. It remembers. The land wasn't just reclaiming itself, it was rewriting everything we'd built on top of it. And it was almost here. The ridge trembled beneath our feet as the glow crept closer through the valley, rippling like a pulse under the soil. Each beat seemed to breathe life back into the flooded land, not the kind of life that grows and heals, but something older, something that had been waiting. The air hummed with energy. Every surface seemed to vibrate, the wooden cabin walls, the metal lanterns, even the glass in the window. Bruno whined, pressing himself against my leg. Karen stood frozen, staring out at the shimmering valley below. The glow was brighter now, outlining the drowned roofs of Meadowbrook like ghostly lanterns under the surface. The whole town seemed to float in eerie stillness. Harris fumbled with his radio again, muttering to himself. "Come on, come on," static hissed, followed by a brief crackling voice. "This is State Emergency Control. All units evacuate. Repeating, ground collapse across the..." The radio cut off. A sharp pop, then silence. Karen turned slowly toward him. "They can't stop it, can they?" Harris didn't answer. He looked pale, older than before. "This isn't just flooding. The whole aquifer system's reversing. It's breathing inward, pulling the water back through the ground like lungs," I finished quietly. "The land's lungs." The same words my grandfather had said years ago came back to me. "Wetlands are the lungs of the earth, boy. They breathe for us when we can't." And now it was breathing again. But not for us. The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of voices. They came from the valley, not screaming, not crying, but whispering in unison, just like before. Karen covered her ears. "Make it stop," she said, trembling. "Please make it stop." But I knew this wasn't something we could stop. The whispers weren't coming from people. They were coming from the land itself, rising through the water, through the trees, through the very air. Outside, the fog thickened again, glowing faintly from beneath. Shapes began to move through it. Tall, thin silhouettes, walking across the flooded plain. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Karen gasped. "Those, are they the workers?" Harris raised his flashlight, shining it down the slope. The beam caught one of the figures, mud-caked, expressionless, moving slowly uphill. Another followed, and another. Their bodies shimmered faintly with the same markings that had covered the slab. "They're not alive," he whispered. "They're part of it now." The ground beneath us shifted again. A deep rumble rolled through the ridge, knocking a lantern off the table. The flame inside flared, then died, plunging us into half-darkness. "Out the back," I said quickly. "We can cut through the woods, reach higher ground." We grabbed what little we could, a flashlight, a rope, a flare gun Harris had kept in a drawer, and slipped out through the back door. The moment we stepped outside, the temperature dropped. Our breaths turned to mist. From behind the cabin came a wet, dragging sound. Bruno barked once and darted toward it. I followed, heart pounding. A figure was crawling from the soil, half buried, hands clawing at the ground. Its eyes glowed faintly blue. It looked up at me and spoke in a voice that wasn't human anymore. "You built where we sleep." I stumbled back. The ground beneath it split open, and a thick stream of water erupted upward, knocking the thing aside. The soil crumbled, forming a sinkhole where the figure had been. "Run!" Harris shouted. We bolted toward the forest, the earth heaving behind us. Trees swayed violently as roots tore free from the soil. The glow from below spread up the trunks like veins of fire. Every time we looked back, more of the ridge had disappeared. The woods ahead were dark, but at least they were dry. For now. Karen tripped again, falling to her knees. I can't keep running. I pulled her up. You have to. If it reaches us, there won't be anything left. We climbed higher, gasping for air, until we reached an overlook above the valley. From there, we saw everything. The wetlands had swallowed Meadowbrook whole. The water glowed from within, alive with motion. The slab, the great stone that had started it all, had surfaced fully now, tilted like a massive monument breaking through the earth. Carvings covered every inch of it, glowing like veins of molten gold. And around it, the shapes moved, circling, chanting in their hollow voices. Karen whispered, "It's not destroying the land, it's rebuilding it." She was right. The road, the homes, the fences, everything unnatural was vanishing beneath the new surface. The wetland was returning to what it once was, ancient and untouched. But it wasn't done with us yet. The ground beneath our feet cracked again, a fissure racing toward us. Bruno barked wildly, pulling at my sleeve. Harris fired the flare gun into the sky, a single streak of red cutting through the fog. But no one would see it out here. Karen screamed as the edge of the overlook gave way. She slipped, catching the branch of a fallen pine. I lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "Hold on!" Her fingers dug into my wrist. Below her, the glow rose closer, swirling, whispering. "It's calling me," she said, her voice hollow. "No, don't listen." Her eyes met mine, full of tears, full of guilt. "I built where it sleeps." And before I could pull her up, she let go. She fell silently, disappearing into the light. Harris shouted her name, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. The glow pulsed brighter for a moment, then dimmed again, as if satisfied. By dawn, the water had stopped rising. The valley was quiet. Meadowbrook no longer existed. Where it had once stood was a vast expanse of wetland, calm, ancient, and eerily beautiful. Harris and I stood at the ridge's edge, the air heavy with silence. "She's gone," he said softly. I nodded. "But so is the road." The wind carried the faint echo of frogs and distant herons, the sounds my grandfather used to call the breath of the land. The wetlands had taken everything back, and somehow it felt right. I turned to leave, Bruno trotting beside me. But as I looked back one last time, I saw movement in the shallow water. A single figure standing among the reeds. It was Karen, or what was left of her. Her skin was smooth, marked with glowing lines, her eyes calm. She didn't speak. She just looked up toward the ridge, then raised one hand, not in anger, not in warning, but in peace. The land remembered her now, and it was finally breathing again. Where are you watching from tonight? Let us know in the comments below.